Hi, so in this video we will discuss how you can run commands in a transaction in Redis. In previous video we discussed atomic commands. So there are so many Redis commands that are atomic by default, and even if you run them one by one concurrently by various clients parallelly, still they would execute successfully without any interruption, and your results wouldn't have any race condition and you wouldn't be requiring any lock. But let's say you have so many commands that you want to run them together. In that case, if you don't have enough atomic commands that Redis provides you, what you can do is you can put all of those commands that you want to run them together in a transaction, and they will run together in a queue in a single batch in Redis, and no one will be interrupting it, right? So that's where transaction is really helpful in Redis. And how generally you run transaction in Redis? So they provide you two commands. So one is multi and second is exec. So I'll also show you one example. So here is one example, and here I'm running three commands. I'm running increment on A, I'm running increment on B, and then I'm pushing in A X, right? So I'm basically running three commands in a transaction. So yeah, I can also show you in terminal how this will happen in a transaction. So let me open my terminal, and here what you can do is you can start your Redis CLI. Inside it, what you can do is you can tell Redis to open a transaction mode. So how do you do it? You write multi. So once you press multi, it will say okay, and now you can see it's now in transaction mode, right? So in transaction mode, what happens is whatever you write inside transaction, it doesn't get executed automatically, it just gets queued. So let's say I write here increment A. So as you can see, it says queued, but if you were not in transaction mode, this would have said okay, right? So whatever you will execute inside transaction, they will just get queued, and they will all run together in the end when you will write exec command, right? So let's write two more commands here. Let's do increment on B, and let's do lpush A X, right? So as you can see, all these three commands, they gave me in results queued, right? And now how to run this full transaction in a single batch? What you can do is you can write exec. So what will happen is I can also show you a diagram. So once you run exec, what happens is all these three commands will run atomically in a single queue batch. So what happens is when you run exec, it will put all these commands in a single command queue. It will pass it to the Redis, and it will execute all these three commands in a single thread atomically, right? And in the results, you will see all the commands results in an array. So let's do that. So once you run exec, you can see I got three results. So it says that value is not an integer or out of range. So for first one, I was not able to increment it because it was not an integer. So why it gave me an error? Because there is a possibility that you already had this variable which was already declared, right? And it might not be an integer. And third one also didn't work because this one was not even a list, so it didn't work. Okay, so yeah, so basically all these three commands ran together, and there is a possibility that some might even error out. Like in our example, it got error out because in my previous videos, obviously I would have declared some variables and they were not obviously reset. So that's why I got an error, right? I can try some other example as well, like if you want to. So I'm now in transaction mode, right? I'll increment number 1. I hope this does not exist. And I increment number 2, and let's say I push new list 1. Okay, so all these commands are queued, and I'll just execute them together. So as you can see, all these three commands, they ran successfully, and every command results is now attached in the terminal, right? So this is how you generally run transaction in Redis, right? And there's also one more thing, like once you're in transaction mode, let's say I'm in transaction mode, right? Let's say I increment num1, increment num2. So all these commands are queued, and let's say if in some if there is some other Redis client and it is also connecting to the same Redis server, it can execute any commands. They will be executed. Basically, these commands, they can run and they won't be getting interrupted by our transaction. Why? Because we haven't even executed our transaction yet. The transaction only executes when you write exec command, right? So that's the beauty of transaction. So yeah, I hope it was clear how you can run transaction. And there are two types of error that can happen in transaction. And the first, this second error we already saw. So here you can see when we've ran the transaction for the first time. So during runtime, there is a possibility that some commands might not even run, because maybe let's say here we were incrementing, but this was not even the integer, right? So that's why it gave an error. And in this case, a was not even the list, so it gave that the key is not holding the correct value, right? So this is a runtime error which you can get when you're executing a transaction. And there are some other errors as well, which you will get before even executing, right? I can show you that example. So let's say you start a transaction, and what you do, maybe by mistake you wrote some wrong command, let's say. So wrong command. So okay, this command doesn't even exist. I'm just writing anything, right? So basically, before even transaction execution, if you write any wrong command or something wrong in the Redis, so it will directly tell you that, hey, you can't run this. So basically, there are two types of error that you usually get in transaction execution. So one is before execution that you get, and second is after execution you see the errors in the results, right? So yeah, I also have some notes as well with me, which I will be sharing in the video description, and I'll also post these in the GitHub repository, which I'll share in the comments and description, which you can check it out, right? And you can also understand it with a real world example. So let's say you are doing some transfer from one bank account to another. You would want to do that in a single transaction, right? You wouldn't want to do that one by one without transaction. So that would really be bad if you're doing it in Redis. So in that case, what you would be doing is, I can also show you one example. So like, let's say you started a transaction and now you want to transfer money from one bank account to another. So for that, I'll do decrement bank account 1, right? You can also give like decrement by. So I want to decrement account 1 by 1000, and I want to increment bank account 2 by 1000, right? And once you run executes, so as you can see, both these commands ran together in a single transaction, right? Although you can run both these commands without a transaction, but generally it's not preferred in Redis. Why? Because there is a possibility that race condition might happen. So yeah, you should always use transactions whenever you are doing multiple commands and you want to run them together. So this is just a real world example, like in mostly bank transfers, you can use transactions, right? Let's move forward. So we already discussed error types. One you get before execution and another you get after execution, right? And also there's no rollback in transactions in Redis, right? So these transactions are similar to SQL transactions, but there's only one difference between both these transactions, is that there is no rollback, right? In SQL, if you're running something in transaction, what happens is if something fails, everything is rollbacked. But in Redis, it's not the case, because Redis wanted to keep everything simple, right? Because otherwise, if Redis wanted to support rollbacks, they would have to do some versioning, they would have to build some undo machinery, which would basically complicate Redis. So yeah, it was not built in this Redis, right? So yeah, that was one drawback, that Redis transactions doesn't give you rollback. It's simple. So you just need to make sure that whatever you are running inside a transaction, not like no single command basically fails. You just need to make sure that every command is successful inside a transaction, because they don't roll back if any command fails in between. You can also check it here, like the first example which I ran here. You can see I ran 3 commands, and out of those only one command was successful, but still it ran all those commands. It didn't roll back anything, right? So yeah. Okay, and yeah, so I already told you when should you use transaction: when you want to run multiple commands in a single batch, right? And there are certain cases where you wouldn't want to use transactions. So if, let's say, whatever operation you want to perform, if those operations can be performed using a single atomic command in Redis, we should always use that. But if, let's say, if the operations that you want to perform can't be done using atomic commands, you should go with transaction. And let's say if you're performing multiple commands and some writes, they're depending on a value that you have to read first. So in that case also, you shouldn't use transactions. Reason being is, I can tell you that. So let's say I'm in a transaction mode, and let's say maybe you want to first get the value of X, right? And then you want to, set the value of Y, set the value of X to maybe, I don't know, 10, right? And then you want to execute it, right? The thing is, here you are depending on some value, right? I mean, even though it would run successfully if, let's say, you don't have many clients connecting to your Redis, but for a high traffic, Redis server, this might, give you some unknown results. Like maybe some other client, might update X in between, right? So whenever you are doing some operations that are depending on a particular value, you should never use transaction. You should always use watch in this, which we will be discussing in next video, right? And let's say if in your commands you have some conditional logic or loops, you should never use transaction. For that we can use Lua scripts, which are basically like other languages like Python and JavaScript, which you can directly run on Redis server. So in those you can do some conditional logic and loops. Like for example, in this one, let's say if you want to do if X is less than 10, then only I want to update it. So I mean, you can't generally write conditions in Redis, so you would be using Lua scripts for that, right? So yeah, this is it related to transactions. I hope it was clear. And there are some questions as well which you can read and test yourself whether you understood correctly about transactions and about these commands or not. So walk through what the server returns for each command in multi-block and see exactly when execution happens. So we already did. So when you write multi, you enter in a transaction mode and you can write as many commands you want. All commands will say queued, and when you run exec, all these commands will run together, right? And second question is, if a transaction contains a misspelled command name, what happens? So for that, obviously you would be getting a compile error, right? And why did Redis deliberately choose not to implement rollback? We already discussed it, because they didn't want it to like make Redis complicated and implement some machinery similar to SQL rollbacks, right? They wanted to keep Redis simple. And why can't you use the result of first queued command to decide the second? So we already discussed it. So if your command is depending on some another command result, you should never use transaction. You should always use watch or maybe Lua scripts for that, which we will discuss in coming videos. And okay, so your transaction touches cart for user 1 and user 2 on Redis cluster. What error do you get and how do you fix it, right? So yeah, on Redis cluster, what error do you get and how do you fix it? Okay, I don't think we would get any error because both users have different carts, so obviously you can run these in transactions, right? I have some references as well in the end. Yeah, you can check it out in my notes. So yeah, that was all about transactions. So just to recap, whenever you want to run multiple commands in a single batch, you can always go with transactions. But if all those commands can be run using a single atomic command, you can use those. But if those commands can't be done using atomic command, you should always use transactions. And how do you use transaction? You can use multi and exec, which I've already told you here with hands-on experience in terminal, how you can run these transactions using multi and exec, right? So I hope this video was useful, and yeah, in the next video we will cover watch, how you can utilize watch inside a transaction. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Thanks everyone. Bye.